Hey, what is up guys? Evan Aldo here. So I want to talk to you all about what Stoicism is and why I believe it's really the only way and best way to live your life. What is Stoicism? Stoicism, in my view, the way I would describe it, and it could be described in so many different ways, thousands of different ways, no way is better than the other to describe it. My way to describe it is it's seeing that there can be good things happening from bad things. Good things coming from bad things. A quote that explains that a little bit is, sometimes when you lose a battle, you find a way to win the war. With all hardship, with all adversity, there can be a way to look forward. There can be a way to succeed, and there can be a way to find better things from that adversity, to find better things, to have better things come from that. And ultimately, you want to succeed and you want things to go your way. But when you have adversity, it's more interesting. It makes it more fun. Let's look at any entertaining thing, any movie, TV show, story, anything like that. They all have a sense of adversity. There is no story that's interesting. There is no story that anyone wants to sit through or read or watch or what have you that has a person succeeding at everything without any form of hardship, without any failure, without anything going wrong. No story like that. And people want to see the story where you fail a lot at first and then you succeed at the end. That's the normal story people want to hear. And our lives what satisfies our lives is not much different than that. People think hardship is such a bad thing. It's not. Our life would be so boring that we'd probably die if there was no hardship, if there was no goal, if there was no adversity, if there was nothing to fight against. And that's probably what we're seeing a lot today, why our life expectancy is declining, because people are living sedentary lives. There's less adversity, less things to go against. That could be a theory why. That's probably another video for another day, but the joy of fighting something, the joy of finding a good from a bad, that is Stoicism. That is Stoicism, the joy from that. Let's bring in some examples. One of the examples Ryan Holiday brings up in his book, The Obstacle Way, which is The Obstacle is the Way, which is all about Stoicism. He brings up the example of Tommy John, the Yankees pitcher, who injured his elbow very badly, and it was career-ending. And there was this experimental surgery, and they told him that the chances are very, very low it would ever work, but we could try it on you if you want. And he gladly tried it, and lo and behold, out of the whatever percentage chance of it working, it did work, and he pitched for many years after. And then, even more adversity. He wanted to play even longer. He was old, and the Yankees cut him, but he wanted to keep playing, and he asked them, he said, I really want to keep playing. And he said, if I show up to your spring training, will you give me a look? If I show up and try out, just try out as a nobody, will you give me a look? And they said, yes, we'll give you a look. We don't think the chances of you ever playing again are very great at all. We think they're extremely low, but we'll give you a look. He shows up. He ends up playing for another, I don't know, a few years or whatever. I don't know. But it worked. That adversity worked, and he was a very old player, and that adversity made him something more. It made him something more. It made him something more than he would have been if everything went his own way from the beginning, if everything went the greatest way from the beginning. So, we look at all of these great things, all of these great names, all of the people who will be remembered years from now, who will leave a legacy. And they all faced a type of adversity, and they used it to their advantage. The difference between them and your average Joe is, your average Joe just thinks that he's a victim, or just thinks that, if something doesn't go his way, he'll get angry, he'll bash out on it, he'll get miserable from it, and he'll let it destroy him. He'll seek fear in it, get fear from it, and it will be a nightmare. But somebody who is a stoic, somebody who's more than that, somebody who knows that there's more in this life than daily drudgeries that we are all told we must go through, that there's something more in this life than that we can have more than that if we could simply fathom it, if we could simply understand it. A Stoic would see the hardship and think, there's something good that will come from this, even if I can't see it right now. Even if it seems terrible, worst possible thing. A Stoic would say, there is something that can come from this. There is something good that could come out of this. And even in my life and lives of many others, I've seen it so many times. Something good comes out of it. When you lose a battle, you can find a way to win the war a lot of times. When I was young, through 7th, 8th grade, it was a very, very rough time in my life. And I went to this rough school where I was bullied a lot. My parents were going through a very rough divorce at the time, and it was terrible. But I went to a private high school a year later. I started at a private grade school. And going through all that and seeing how bad some things were in the United States of America, seeing how bad some people had it, how bad some children had it, it showed me to not take anything for granted. It showed me to take the blessing I had to go to this private high school and to work hard and get really smart and craft myself in a way where I could have more, where I could win in the end, where I could be better than everyone else in the end. It showed me that. And if I just had everything from the beginning, I probably wouldn't have respected it as much. I probably may have taken it for granted. I mean, I don't know. There are people who grow up very rich, who do extremely well and don't take anything for granted. So, I mean, every case is different. But, it gave me a lot of happiness, though that first year of high school at least. It wore off, after that. You like anything else, you get used to it. But that first year was a hell of a lot of happiness, not having to deal with, bullying, constant nonsense, all the time. And it felt so good. And it made me a greater person because of it. Sure, there's people who have post-traumatic stress from hardships and all things like that, and complain about it for the rest of their lives, how they're a victim and how things didn't go their way. And I'm sure what they went through a lot of times is terrible. I'm sure. I believe when somebody says what they went through is terrible, I'm sure it's true. But complaining about it all day isn't going to help their case. That's just going to remind them more about it, and that's just going to lead them down a dark hole and lead them into a negative inertia, and nothing will really turn from that. But you got to look towards what you could get out of that, and you got to forget some of the dumb things that you're going to do early on, or some of the bad things that happen to you, the cringy things. You got to forget about that, or forget about it, or just accept it as it is and use it to your advantage. That's what Stoicism is, using everything towards your advantage, going towards it. Religion, extremely, extremely Stoic. Buddhism especially, I think even Christianity, all of them really, in my view, are extremely Stoic. Explaining that it's going to be okay towards hardship, and that something good can come out of this, and that there's always going to be suffering, but if you accept it, and if you stay in the present, and if you trust that things will be okay, then they will. Everything is so mental. Everything. I never used to know this when I was young. I never used to know how mental everything is. I mean, even physically, your mental state controls how the decisions you make, even physically, how much you work out, everything like that. Your mental state. And that's what's malleable. That's based on the choice that you're going to make in your mind, whether you want to be more or whether you just want to stay within your comfort zone and be less. And being more is what will make you happy. It's what will trigger adrenaline in your mind, what will improve your autonomic nervous system, toning in and coming into that through flow state and getting there and really controlling that. We're so sedentary today. We're so staying in one place, and that's why our life expectancy is lessening. That's why things are not going right. That's why things aren't as good as they can be. A lot of people say, a lot of smart people say, are at the top, you know, they may not say this, but they're thinking, they're glad that there's so many weak people. They're glad that there's so many people who stay within their comfort zones. Because if everyone tried, you know, if everyone worked as hard as them, they wouldn't be at the top. Everyone would be more equal. You know, we're all pretty similar. You know, we're not that different physiologically. We're not that different. You know, the difference is mainly the family you were born into, or growing up with wealth, all these things. And, you know, if you grew up really poor and you make it, it looks so much more impressive than somebody who grows up rich and makes it. You know, you gotta relate onto what your parents did. If your parents were multimillionaires and you just, you know, take over their business and make the same rate as them, that doesn't look impressive at all. That looks unimpressive. To even be equally as impressive, you probably have to, at that point, if you grew up multimillionaire, you'd probably have to become way bigger, maybe even a billionaire, to look equally as impressive. To look more impressive than your parents, geez, you probably have to be Forbes 100. So everything is towards that sense. Everything is relative. And, you know, I ultimately believe, you know, leaving that legacy, the legacy is the number one thing after you die. You know, even with technology going the way it is, I mean, I don't even know, we may be the first generation that doesn't die, that's able to live forever. And, you know, you can't be afraid about it. You can't have fear about that. That's maybe a scary thought to some of you. I mean, me in the beginning, that was a scary thought. But, you know, it's okay. You gotta accept it. You gotta work with what you have. And that's another Stoic teaching of that adversity. And that's another thing to think about. You know, leave that legacy no matter what. Even if we have a generation that doesn't die, you know, things are changing incrementally. With technology, things are changing so much. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not negative about it. I think ultimately great people can stand up and make things go the greatest possible way using the Stoicism. I don't see any other way to really live your life other than a Stoic way, because there's still, in this day and age, things you can't control, terrible things that you can't control. And you have to use them to your advantage. That's the only way to live, in my view. That's the Stoic way. Goodbye.